Hey everyone, welcome back once again to the Epic Episodic Podcast, where we tell you about how we feel about, well, all the shows. And I'm here with my wonderful co host of over 25 years,
I'm David.
and I'm Sterling. And together we make all the shows. And we're really excited to talk about at least some of the shows that we were really excited to talk about last week, but weren't able to get to quite yet. So, as a special thanks for our very first foray into the podcast universe, we are going to be talking about a couple different things, but we're going to make it succinct. The last time we were very expansive. We talked a lot about what we like and what we enjoy. But this time around, we're going to talk about some of the movies on the not top fives. And don't worry, we're going to be quick and get those out of the way as soon as possible and get you to the fantastic. I say again, fantastic. There's some,
Fantastic Four.
yes, there's some comedic drum roll somewhere, but or whatever in the world there from what I did. Anyway, yeah, we're going to talk about Fantastic Four.
Sure.
We're going to talk about the inside baseball, as my wonderful co host and father loves to say. And we're also going to touch back on the inside baseball of Superman 2025 that we missed last time around. So, we're really excited. Please do stick around, and we'll give you something to stick around for.
Yeah,
So,
we're going to tell you how we feel about it, and we're going to tell you how they did it.
indeed. So, without further ado, let's get into the not top fives. Last time we started with you, so why not do it again? We'll start with you. What are one of the top fives that you say is not very good in the superhero genre?
Okay, well, let me be transparent here and say that I usually don't review things that I don't like. I want to stay on the positive side. It was a little bit of a challenge to figure out what to put on my not favorite top five. So I put in movies that I tried to watch but couldn't get through them. And it's not that they're totally terrible, they all have moments. But I'm going to start with Batman and Robin. This was, I think, the third or fourth movie in the Batman series that started with Michael Keaton and was directed by Tim Burton, and that really, was a huge hit when it came out. But the sequels were not always very good, and Batman and Robin was probably the most rough of all of them. Even though they had stars and everything, it seemed like they didn't quite know how to tell the story that they were going to do. It's like, oh, this is a comic book movie. How do we do it? And Batman and Robin, I just couldn't quite get through it. But if you want to be a Batman completist and see it, it has some nice moments.
Yeah, funny enough, I did have Batman and Robin, but it was not at my number five. It was at my number four. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It felt really disjointed. This was one of those situations where they made this movie sort of, it felt like out of nowhere, and they tried to throw things at you at the audience and tried to make it all stick somehow, and it didn't really stick.
Yeah, I
It
mean, they
was,
had a great actor as Batman with George Clooney, but
yeah.
somehow, even though he's a great actor, he was not my favorite Batman.
Yeah, and, I prefer what they did with, Batman Forever. I felt like that style did what they tried to do here just a tad bit better. And so what I mean when I say out of nowhere is like continuity was really confusing. Like they changed the Batman up and it just it definitely would not recommend that you see this in any financial capacity. Maybe if it's on the TV and you've got 5 minutes of spare time to see what we're talking about, sure, give it a shot. But yeah, this is not one that you want to invest more than an hour of your time at best, right? So, yeah. And this is what we mean. Like, we don't really want to focus on the bad movies because it was bad enough having to watch the whole thing. Why would I spend another half an hour trying to talk about why it's bad, beating a dead horse there, right? So, yeah. Number five was actually, I know it's not in theme, I know it's whatever, but this is how bad it was. Is it doesn't deserve to be at where it might have been. Fantastic Fantastic Four, the one from 2015. This was a movie that was trying to uh, fit the Fantastic Four into this weird box, into this box that it doesn't really belong in. And that is trying to be like a DC type, like very dramatic, very ooh, be sad, ooh, be scared, ooh, and that works in comic books from time to time, like Fantastic Four. But you kind of have to lean in to what Fantastic Four is, and this movie didn't do that. Well, at least in my opinion. Perhaps
It's
I'm
true.
not a creative genius. I'm not, some Scorsese or James Gunn genius here, and I'm not making the big bucks, right? So I'm not the one that gets to make the decisions on these, but I am an audience member of over 20 years. And what I can tell you is that when you try and fit a theme into an intellectual property that doesn't really work, it has two results. Either it works really well or it works really bad, or you forget about it. Well, I guess so. There's three. You forget about it. See, that's how it works. You forget about it, and this one was right on the edge of forget and doesn't work. Does anyone really jump out of their seats and say, "Yeah, I remember that one, man. That was a great one." No one's really talking about Fan Fantastic Four. Michael B. Jordan was decent. I mean that we'll give him credit, and that's why it gets number 5. But then you don't get number 4 because, you did not deserve the number that you added to your title. You got the Fantastic Four for free, but we're not giving you number 4 there. I would also say that the plot line was really disjointed. It doesn't really feel like it fit into, I believe it was the Fox cinematic universe that it took place in.
Yeah,
Um,
that was when Fox was making the superhero movies on their own before they had that big crossover where Marvel and 20th Century Fox decided to make Spider-Man together, and that worked out really well. But that was after this one didn't work.
Yeah. But like even down to the minute details of like the costumes, right? Like the costumes were the most basic of basic sci-fi. Like you could have grabbed that off of a pile from the sci-fi SCYFI TV syndicated channel where it has all these weird like D-list and C-list sci-fi movies. Like it feels like they grabbed those costumes from a set from that and just kind of threw it on, or it's from CW, some sort of really low budget or mid budget situation. And that's not how you should be treating an intellectual property as valuable as a Marvel property like Fantastic Four. And I understand, not all audiences are going to jive with the sort of old school style of superheroes. But again, when you try and fit a theme that doesn't really work, it either has, like I said, two results and a third one that you forget, and this was a little bit of the latter of the two, and that's not a good situation. So move on from that one and let's do it. All right, go ahead, Dad. Number 4.
Okay, I'm actually doing these in the order that they came out. So the next one is Superman Returns. That's the one that was kind of a one-off with Brandon Routh as the title character, Superman, and their heart was in the right place, but the movie just it just didn't work for me. The exciting scenes weren't that exciting. The dramatic scenes weren't that dramatic. So I'm glad that they tried to reboot Superman, but we had to wait for several more sequels before they really got it right in Superman 2025.
Yeah, I didn't see that one unfortunately, so I can't say one way or the other. So I'll just trust your judgment.
Well, that
And
says a lot right there. You know, if you want to see it, that's a lot.
Yeah. I may have seen a movie clip or two on YouTube or something, but yeah, don't really have much else to say. Okay, number 4 on my end. This is going to be the Amazing Spider-Man number 2, not Amazing Spider-Man 1. The reason I'm saying number 2 is because they had a real interesting setup in number 1. People kind of put Amazing Spider-Man 1 on the lower end, and they put number 2 even worse. But I'm not putting Amazing Spider-Man 1 on my list because I believe that if you had a decent setup for number 2, that number 1 would have actually been decent. But instead, what happened with number 2 was a conjoined mess of things that didn't really fit together. It felt like this was in the writing room for too long, and they just said, "Hey, let's put this one out." And that shows when they have that weird end credit scene. Everyone's wondering, "Oh, what's gonna happen with Oscorp? Oh, the Oscorp, cinematic universe or whatever, the Spider-Man cinematic universe with Oscorp at the end there." And that was like a perfect representation of the fact that it's like, well, you're gonna tease that, but then you're not actually gonna use that, and yeah, it's just the acting was pretty canned. Not anything particularly special. Not really that impactful to the
Was this the
superhero.
Andrew Garfield Spider-Man?
Yes, this is the Andrew Garfield one where Norman Osborn is sort of acting as the foil to the Amazing Spider-Man, and they try and do something to pull at your heartstrings at the end there, and it just hits hollow because, and we'll talk about a similar reason why later on in my list, but this is the second movie, dude. You don't get to do this on the second movie. Give it a couple more movies, but doing it this early really lessens the impact. Although I appreciate that they try to do something impactful, try and pull at your heartstrings, it just falls flat because you're like, I care nothing about this character. I don't care about this movie, and then you're just gonna throw that in there to try and like get the heartstrings pulled. It doesn't work. So a very unfortunate series of circumstances, even though I get complimented for looking like the star of that show, Andrew Garfield. If I shave my beard or trim the beard, you might confuse me as the Amazing Spider-Man. But even still, I'll have to stick to the facts, ma'am. And in this case, the facts are this one is just not one to go see. Amazing Spider-Man 1, I would say controversial. Maybe you give it a shot. But Amazing Spider-Man 2, just leave your opinions where they were at Amazing Spider-Man 1 and forget this one even happened.
Although Andrew Garfield did make a comeback as Spider-Man, and he was excellent in No Way Home.
I was gonna say, yeah, basically, it was very clear that it was the writing that was the problem and the story that they gave him, not his actual acting ability. And we know this because he starred in many other different movies and TV shows and seen great success. So it's not that Andrew Garfield's a bad actor; it's that he was given bad material and a bad set of circumstances. And there's only so much that a star actor can do. And remember, I put that movie in my honorable mentions. So yeah, I did give him credit where it was due. All right, go ahead. And you're number three.
Okay, for number three, I choose the Spirit. And the Spirit is a superhero character from like the 1940s. And he was created by Will Eisner, who the Eisner Awards, the highest award that you can get in the world of comic books, is named after him. So, it's a really cool, well-respected character. And the problem is that the movie just didn't work. It didn't have the suspense, the mystery, the fun. It was just, it was hard for me to watch the movie. So I don't want to, criticize it too much. It's just that the people making it may have been perfectly well intentioned. It's just that the movie didn't quite come out right. And I couldn't really get through it because I knew the spirit was good, but this movie was not telling us anything good about the spirit.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know anything about the Spirit. I haven't looked into their lore. I don't know what that character is or their context. So
Yeah,
once again,
he's
I'll
kind
have
of
to
like a
defer to your
mysterious
expertise.
detective character, kind of like an alt-world Batman.
Ah, I see. So it's more like supernatural Batman kind of situation. It sounds like.
Yeah, kind of. The best thing is to Google the spirit and you'll see, pages because even though it's not in the public domain, it's not considered a big deal. So it's pretty easy to find images of it. And you can see that it was definitely way ahead of its time.
Well, at least that had something going for it, is that it was a little ahead of its time. But yeah, unfortunately,
No, no, no. I mean the original Spirit comics were, not
oh,
the
not the movie.
adaptation
Okay, dang.
was not ahead of its time. What I'm trying
Okay.
to say is that the Spirit comic books are good. The issue is just how to adapt it into a movie.
I was
And
trying to give it some credit here. I
yeah,
apologize,
and
America.
it took a long time. I mean, Superman was first published in 1938, and it took 40 years to get a really good Superman movie. And then it took more decades after that to get, a good Marvel movie. And so, it just took a long time for people to learn how to make a good movie and tell a comic book story that had the magic of those comics in it.
Understandable. And this goes back to what we spoke about briefly. Go check out episode 1 for our top fives, where we discussed how there was a time for the vast majority of film and media in America, there weren't really superhero movies to go off of. And it wasn't until the turn of the 21st century that we saw more risks being taken in that space in terms of superheroes. So, like, it was sort of like a spike in the 90s, and then it sort of dipped, and then another spike in the 2000s, and then it shot way up around the late 2000s. So,
Yeah, a
yeah, it
lot of
was
that is visual
understandable.
effects technology. The first superhero to really start having a long series of movies was Batman, and that I think is because Batman's superpowers are easier to create on screen than, say, Mr. Fantastic or
Iron Man is a big one. Iron
Iron
Man.
Man. Yeah, these sci-fi, high-tech, supernatural powers.
Doctor Strange is a huge one too. I don't think you could do Doctor Strange in the 2000s era, sorry, but that's just too fantastical.
Yeah, exactly. It's like to show these other worlds and to make them look believable. But let's go on to
Yeah,
the next one.
I was gonna say, yeah, you read my mind. See, this is why we're co-hosts, okay? We read each other's minds. We know that we need to get the flow going. And with that being said, we are gonna go with our number two. Now, those first three movies that I mentioned were not necessarily movies that I didn't like fully complete. These were movies that just had a lot of bad things going on, but somehow, some way, something about it kept it going. Those movies had something unique that kind of keep your eyes going a little bit. But now we get into the movies that just really made it. I wanted to walk away, even though I spent full price on the movie. It just makes you want to walk out. And we start with number two, which is Batman versus Superman. Now, I wanted to fit the Justice League in there too, but I was going to put that in the dishonorable mention. But let me regale you with a story, ladies and gentlemen, you viewers. There once was a man named Superman, and he came from a really mysterious planet. And he went to a small town in Kansas, and there were these two lovely parents who raised him as best they could with their old folksy American way. And so he grew up to embody those characteristics. And then he had to do some really bad stuff to protect the planet that he loved. And then he met some billionaire guy, and then there was some monster dude, and then he died. Does that sound like a fun story to you guys? Do you think that that really like pulls you in? I know I'm cheating, but that's basically what they did with Batman v Superman. They introduced this amazing character. They built it up so much. They told you, "Wow, look at this! Whoa!" And then they ruined it. They butchered him. They made him terrible in so many different ways, and that was on purpose. So I kind of referenced this in the previous episode when I talked about how Superman 2025 was a massive improvement to Man of Steel. Many reasons why, but there was one main reason, we'll say. And that's because the storyline that they're choosing for Superman is a hopeful vision. And the one they chose for Superman here was a storyline called the Injustice storyline, which basically pits Superman as this evil being that has turned his heart has turned dark, and he wants to kill everybody and everything and take it over. And he has this army of minions that do his bidding. He basically becomes a bad guy. Superman becomes a bad guy in the Zack Snyder universe. And why would I want to watch Superman be a bad guy in the one of the first new iterations in this 21st century, in this exciting era of comic books where it's really awesome and great and we're having a lot of fun? Why would I want to go back and say, oh, well, Superman's a bad guy? It's not a fun experience to have as a moviegoer. It just really takes the mood down. Now, I will also say, in fairness, I do think it's important that filmmakers take bold approaches that are new and unique. And we've had Superman be a good guy and goody two shoes for many years. So I can somewhat see what they were trying to do with Man of Steel, but I do not see what they're trying to do with Batman v Superman. It was not good. It was a butchering of the character. And I'm going to talk too long if I talk more.
That one would also be on my list of movies that was really hard for me to get through.
They butchered Batman as well. They made Batman kill. Why would you do that? That's the whole point of Batman, is to not make him kill. And I must admit, I must be candid with you, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, that when I ended the movie and I was walking back with my father, said to him, "Well, I kind of like that they're trying to do something interesting with Batman. Trying to make him kill." And that was because I didn't have as much experience with the Batman IP. I watched some of it, but not 100%. But now that I've looked back, Justice League is an Elseworld story, okay? Which is, why don't you explain to the audience what an Elseworld story is?
Oh, and Elseworld is just alternative universe, and that's something that comics have done forever. Is that they want to tell a story that doesn't quite fit with rules, the way that characters behave, etc., in the main story world. So they create an elsewhere, an alternative universe, a multiverse, where you can have this other story happen.
Exactly.
Marvel actually made a whole series that's just that, What If, where
Yes.
every story in What If, it was a ongoing series, and every story had some alternative universe with something that wouldn't happen in the main universe.
Yeah, and so doing that with Superman this early on into this new, generation of Superman was just really a very poor decision. It was an attempt, I believe, based on my research on this and understanding, that this was basically Warner Brothers' attempt to beat Marvel. They thought that they could do something unique, and they brought in Zack Snyder. You might recall his work such as Watchmen, um,
Which
and
is great.
uh, and
And
that was, pretty good. Yeah, I forgot to put that in my honorable mentions in the last episode, but Watchmen was pretty good. The works that he has done were more dramatic and sort of the antithesis of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Warner Brothers, in their infinite wisdom, said, okay, well, let's try something that'll kind of compete with them and be different and unique. And also Ben Affleck sort of had an influence on that decision as well. He had inspiration to want to do a different sort of Batman, a Elseworld sort of Batman, and so things sort of evolved. And in the creative end of things, I respect their courage, but as far as the execution, I do not respect, because it was clear that there was not as much passion for the intellectual property, and there was more a passion for their own personal vision for how to execute these characters. And those are two different conversations completely. And sometimes that can work, and in this case, it definitely did not. So
When you're adapting work that's really well known and has a long history, it's usually not such a good idea to stray too far from that, because people kind of know what they're getting, and that's kind of why they're going to the movies. So if you don't deliver that, then it has to be amazingly good for people to accept it. Otherwise, they're just going to be disappointed, because they already have an idea of what they're going to see. So, it's probably not the right approach to take for a giant blockbuster that's a IP that's supposed to be like a flagship for your whole studio.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
and yeah.
understand why they did it, because, like you said, they wanted to do something different. And, Marvel tried to do that with Thor, the Dark World. They wanted to have a darker version of superheroes and Thor. And it just was too slow and dark. And I didn't feel like I was in the Marvel Cinematic Universe anymore. The MCU can cover a lot, but this one didn't, it didn't work for me. It felt like it was not the kind of movie that I was going in to see, that would have action and fun and interesting characters, and would have elements that I'd recognize from the comic books. So uh, again, it had some beautiful scenes, where the set design and the costumes and lighting, cinematography, all that was just, beautiful, and can't take that away from the designers and all that, that they did great work. It's just that it wasn't the right story, or the way to tell the story. So I had trouble getting through it. But, they can't all be great.
That's very true. There were definitely some misses in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I didn't include any of the misses in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in my top 5, because none of them made me actively dislike what I was watching on the screen to a point where I was want to walk out. The simple fact that you knew that everything was connected made you want to stay and stick around, which was, I think, the genius of doing all these sequels together, because doing sequelception, it really gives you this feeling of, oh, I need to see it. Because guess what? I missed Thor the Dark World. I didn't see it. That's why I didn't put it in my list. But as it turns out, it was a very important plot line later on in the rest of the MCU. There was this whole thing about how, the special MacGyver device in that movie actually mattered in the later episodes of
Yes,
the
that's
Marvel Cinematic.
true. Uh, all of these movies that are on my not favorite list had good moments in them.
Yeah, there's so much that we could say about the bad movies, but you should just trust us when we say we don't like them, and the things that we said why. We could go in depth, but let's not. Let's enjoy the good movies that we want to watch, okay? So, but we have to end with our final number one, and that is a Suicide Squad, specifically the one with Jared Leto. The
Oh yeah.
one Suicide Squad 2016, not to be confused with the Suicide Squad in 2021. Now, the Suicide Squad in 2021, I give more credibility because number one, it was directed by James Gunn, and he, I think, knew how to do the Suicide Squad property a little bit better, and it just felt more succinct as a movie. It still was bad, don't get me wrong, but not to the level of Suicide Squad 2016. Now, Suicide Squad 2016 is an example of a movie similar to the Justice League, where, as we talked about in the previous episode, there are movies that get superhero smorgasbord right, as in Avengers. Basically, all the Avengers get that right. Captain America Civil War gets that right. And there are smorgasbord superhero movies that get it totally, absolutely 110% incorrect. And that includes Suicide Squad. There are so many characters in here that come in to play, half of which you don't remember, the other half of which you don't care about. And the two that matter, Harley Quinn, cast wonderfully as Margot Robbie. Margot Robbie was a shining star, and then Jared Leto, for you care the exact opposite reason. You say this is terribly cast. What are they doing? This is awful. This is a mess. And oh my gosh, it was just so hard to watch this movie, man. It was like painful getting through how cringe it was. And this also goes back to what I said about The Dark Knight, and how I said that method acting can be cringe. And this was very much cringe. Jared Leto did not do Joker well here. You can see what he was trying to do. He was trying to do like a modern take on the Joker, but it fell flat on its face. And all these characters, like, they try and make it edgy, like, ooh, they're bad guys, and so they make them do bad guy stuff. But that actually has the opposite effect to the audience, because you're looking at these characters, you're going, why would I care? Why would I root for these guys? They're doing evil stuff. They're killing people. They're not sympathetic, really. I mean, there's only one or two I would say that are sympathetic. The Deadshot character and Margot Robbie's character, because one is trying to provide for their family, and the other is in an abusive relationship. Other than that, though, it's like forgettable. You don't care. It's just awful. And
Yes.
yeah, what can you say that hasn't already been said about it 1,000 times over? It's just bad, 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 bad.
Yes. Well, I think it had good production design, though. It had some nice scenery. People, did some good things. None of these are like the worst movie ever made. There's lots of candidates for that, and fortunately, I don't think there's any superhero ones that are there. So let's come to my final one is Justice League: The Snyder Cut, and
Ah.
there's a complicated story behind this that we don't need to get into. It's the Snyder Cut because Josh Whedon had been the director of the previous one, and they wanted Snyder to come in and do his version of it, and it turned into this 4-hour epic, and it was just too much, too slow. It was beautiful to look at moment to moment, and there were interesting things that happened occasionally, but the moments weren't strung together, and it didn't build up to things often enough to hold my attention. So, I managed to somehow get through it, but it definitely was one of the kind of overblown, even maybe ponderous kind of superhero movies that uh, it somehow forgot that it was an action movie and tried to be a drama without having the level of drama that it would take to hold your attention for that long.
I will say that personally, I felt the Snyder cut was better than the original cut because it adds
Oh
a lot more
yeah,
context.
yeah.
But it's kind of like sprinkling peppermint candy on a pile of dud, dung, is like, well, you improved it for someone, I guess, but like, who's eating that schlop, It's not going to anybody human. So it was just
Yeah, so
it just
those
made you feel not great because you're like, well, you should have done this in the movie, but then it would have
so
still
that
been
gives
bad.
you an idea of some of the things that are not among our favorites, but we won't be talking about much of that in the future because I like to
Yes.
emphasize the positive. There's so many good movies out and so many good TV shows and video games that there's scarcely time to be able to review all the good ones.
Now, I do want to note a disclaimer, however. If you, the audience, wish to request a comment on our part about a particular movie in your mind, whether we thought it was good or whether we thought it was bad, there is a high chance that if you email us at alltheshows010 at gmail.com, we will get back to you. Or if you comment on our various platforms where we will be posting both in audio and visual formats, then perhaps that might change in the future. Perhaps we might read your comment and you say, "What did you think about, Batman Forever? Or what did you think about, I don't know, Ghost Rider, or whatever? What did you think about the Mysterious Men? That movie from 1999 that created the awesome Smash Mouth All Star song." So be sure to comment to us, and we might do something special like that. But for the foreseeable
But we
future,
love
we're going to stick.
comments and interacting. So if you want us to do something, then we will do it. I don't know if you've ever seen Honest Trailers. They introduce each trailer with messages that they've got from their followers that say, "Why don't you do this one, this one, this one, this one?" And
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah.
"Okay, we'll do this one."
We are called all the shows for a reason, and we wouldn't possibly dare to be dishonest to you, the viewers. So that option is always available to you. So without further ado, I would like to get to what we really want to get to, or at least what I want to get into. Something special, something unique, something fantastic. The Fantastic Four First Steps 2025. Why don't you tell the audience what your expectations were going into this fantastic film?
Well, a Fantastic Four were the flagship, the first and the most innovative of all the Marvel comics. In fact, Stan Lee actually started putting the banner, the world's greatest comic magazine, on every issue. And they really honestly tried to live up to it being the world's greatest comic magazine. They tried to have characters and stories and concepts that were really cool and different from what anybody else was doing in every single issue. So they set a really high standard. And then when their other superheroes came, Fantastic Four and the Hulk and the Avengers and all of these other things, they came from the Fantastic Four. So for years, decades, 20th Century Fox had negotiated the rights to the Fantastic Four, and they tried several times to make Fantastic Four movies. And they didn't work very well. But Kevin Feige, when Disney and Fox merged several years ago, said that they were going to do it right. And so I was hoping that they actually did do it right, but I knew that it had proved to be very tricky for them to adapt. What Shankman and Feige came up with was this really cool concept that they were going to set the Fantastic Four in an alternative version of the 1960s, where they have faster than light travel and teleportation and super advanced technology, but the design aesthetic was like the 1960s. And it looked like it was going to be very cool. just for that. You know, the design and the concept were cool enough that just for that reason, it was kind of exciting. And also, they were emphasizing the family aspect of it, which was again part of the key of what made Fantastic Four different, is that they were all a family and they all knew each other and worked together. And they just came from a different place than loners like Superman or Batman. And they actually delivered, and it was one of those rare magical movies that felt like a comic book. And that's the highest praise because the best comic books were like a high-tech experience. People today don't see it quite that much because they don't read as much in general. But when Fantastic Four first came out, those comics were high-tech and different. The visuals were really interesting and cinematic, and they were using unusual locations, unusual points of view, and including technology and all that. And the vocabulary was bigger, and the concepts were more adult, you know, grown up and sophisticated. So those comic books really created a kind of magical experience when you read them because there wasn't any other way to get that. The movies didn't have the technology to make something that complicated and far out. They could make, you know, wonderful sci-fi movies like 2001, but that was, you know, like the greatest filmmaker with the greatest team with a huge budget. And, you know, it was just like one specific story. They weren't trying to create like a universe of superheroes. That was just way far beyond what the technology of the time could do. But now we got in the 21st century and we do have the technology to do it. We just needed to have someone who understood why those stories were great. And that's what the Fantastic Four First Steps does, is it brings out all those qualities that made it great. And they're really grounded in things that happened in the comic books or that happened in the 1960s. And they did an alternate world version of it, but you could see that, yes, this was all stuff that came from the comics and it worked. But you didn't have to know uh, any of that because you could just walk in and it would be a standalone movie. So that was another level that it succeeded on. You didn't need to see any previous Marvel movies or know anything else about the characters. They introduced them beautifully in the movie. And what can I say? I mean, it's one of the few movies that I wanted to see again right away in the theater on a big screen because it was just so uplifting. You know, you got a rush from watching it.
Well, this is why, in part, I suggested that we put together this podcast because, like, you have, shared with me completely new information I never even knew. Like, you just threw that out, and that's what I find so special about talking about these movies with you is that, like, these sorts of histories come out from the woodworks or from the comic book pages as they were. And I also feel like it helps keep these memories living on. That's the only way history lives on is by passing on the information to the next generation. And unfortunately, I just don't have that rich history like you do. What I do know are some comic books that I've read, and I do remember a plot line with the Thing, Ben Grimm. I forget which comic line it was, but they really focused on his struggle with humanity. I guess you could say, him being the Thing, right? This might have been a comic book thing for generations or whatever, but there was one that was kind of on the older end. It looked like it was from the 60s to the 70s. I'll have to do some research after the podcast is done. But I was really fascinated by that, and it really made me think that this was a unique kind of superhero comic, which made me want to, read some of the other things going on, and then I got to see all the fun, fantastic things going on in the Fantastic Four comics. All the wonderful characters. And I just really liked what was going on with that style, the very retro, old school sort of superhero stuff. For me, I'm a sucker for the classics, and this was definitely one of those classic kind of superhero comics. Unfortunately, we didn't really have too many reference points. Again, like I say before in the previous episode, one of my biggest movies of all time was The Incredibles, and that was based on Fantastic Four in a lot of ways, and that was the closest you could get, and it was pretty good. Of course, me having it
Oh,
in the
Brad
top
Bird
5.
hates it when people bring that up, but it's so obviously inspired by that, even if there were changes made.
Well, what does he hate specifically? Does he hate that people
Oh, he
associate with?
hates the idea that people think that it's not original. And it is
Oh,
clearly inspired by, has the same kind of superpowers. It has the same kind of family dynamics. It has the same kind of battle sequences. I mean, it's clearly somebody who has read Fantastic Four comics.
well, if it makes him feel any better, it wasn't until much later in my life, going back to the Hitchcock kitchen refrigerator theory. It wasn't until many lunches and many midnight snacks later that I realized, hey, wait a minute. The daughter is very similar to Sue Storm, and the baby had the flame powers, and of course the woman had the stretch, and then the guy is strong like the thing. So yeah, like you said, very similar. So I'm not saying it as a dig, but by any means, I'm saying it's a positive actually that they did this justice and they did it in a couple unique ways that superhero IPs did not do at the time. They were very revolutionary. So I'm saying it's a good thing. I like that
Oh,
animation.
yes, yes.
Anyways,
Uh, that was taken to the next level in the new Fantastic Four.
yeah.
Uh, because animation is a wonderful art form, but so is live acting. And the actors that they got were really well cast and they were really committed to portraying the characters. So you could see this was a 21st century version of Sue Storm, where she was committed to using her powers for good, but she also was dedicated to her family and wanted to take care of them. And you had Reed Richards, whose greatest superpower isn't something that he got from cosmic energy. It was that most
Yeah.
intelligent person who ever lived, and he's constantly inventing these amazing new technologies.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I love that they made him unique, they didn't make him a one-trick pony or whatever. Human Torch has gotten a bad rap over the years because he's been portrayed so terribly, but yeah, so but I'll get to that in the spoiler section. But for now, expectations was we got it bad on Fox. Fox didn't do it right, and then we got it bad on Fox again, right? So we're on two strikes, right, on the live action. So I was like, I'm not low expectation, but it's MCU, so I'm like somewhat high. And then I saw some of the trailers. It looked good. I like the retro style, but I didn't know that it was in an alternate universe. I didn't know that until the lights dimmed and the theater turned on and you saw that it was an alternate universe. And I actually liked that they did that because it gave them so much creative freedom in this movie. And again, we'll talk about that in the spoilers. But so going in, I thought this was going to be related to all the stuff going on currently that we know on Earth 616, I believe it was, which is where the Avengers are and where all the movies
Yes,
that
yes.
you know and
We
love take
live
place.
in Earth 616.
And that's where the Avengers in their universe in the movies take place. So I thought this was taking place in the 60s then, and this made me do all kinds of questions like, how are they going to explain what happened and blah, 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 blah. But if I had known that it was alternate, I would have said my expectations are like at a 7 out of 10 expectation. But going in, I was at like a 6 because I was already with like I was already in superhero fatigue, even though I was coming off of the high of Superman and all that stuff. But the MCU specifically is sort of, it's wearing on me. The TV shows are not ideal and the movies have been kind of meh recently. Like Eternals was not great. So I was like, okay, but you're doing Fantastic Four in the MCU, so you get points and all that stuff. So and the visuals looked really fantastic. I keep on saying fantastic, but it's a hard not to find a word other than fantastic to
Yeah,
describe them.
well, Stan called them the right name. They are the Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
They aren't just great or super. They're the most superlative of all.
yeah.
And,
The
I don't want to set it up
Excalibur.
like this is a perfect movie. It's not a perfect movie, and
Yeah,
that's
we'll get
actually
into
one
that.
of its charms is that everything looks and feels like it could be real people who have good days and bad days. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but they're always there doing their best.
Indeed. So those were our expectations going in. We both had somewhere around positive expectations. What do you think? Was it okay? Was it like barely any good, or was it
I loved
fantastic?
it. I mean, it was like at least a
Yeah,
9
yeah.
or a 10 out of 10 because I actually wanted to go see it again soon. After I saw Superman, I thought, oh, I'll enjoy watching this again on streaming or whatever. I might even see it in the theater with a friend again or something. But with Fantastic Four, I knew that I had to see it again really soon because the whole experience of the sights and the sounds and the feelings and the way the story developed and the magical moments, I wanted to relive that. And sure enough, when I watched it again, all those things were just as good as they were the first time.
I gotta tell you, I kind of cheated because I got to get the IMAX theater experience at a relatively low discount. I have what's called the AMC Stubs Pass, but the Stubs Pass gives you 3 movie tickets a week, and you get 12 tickets in a month. So, I mean, that's pretty darn good value, but you get to do IMAX. That's the special benefit as well. So you don't just get like, you
Nice.
so if you did 2 IMAX movies, you would get your value back, really. And it was this really awesome. I'll show some footage here. It was this really awesome theater experience, and yeah, it was really cool. I'm glad I saw it with this experience because like this had so many awesome visuals attached to it. Tell us about the visuals.
Wow. Well, I mean, the cinematography and the visual effects were wonderful. I mean, just starting with their home. I mean, they live in a skyscraper, this futuristic skyscraper that has all of this retro future furniture and design in it. And it just looks like a place that you would want to live in. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Like in today, like not even where they are, but like that's the trick of being in this universe is that
all the technology is
yeah.
futuristic for our century. It's just the design aesthetic is the 1960s. So you feel like you're in this really cool, unique home that
Yeah.
uh, where they have ways of cooking the food and their TV sets, everything about it is like really cool. And of course, all this had to be made special for the movie, and all that worked really well. And then, they had the astronauts phase of the Fantastic Four. They had spacesuits that were really cool. They designed unique spacesuits that just looked really cool, and that's hard to do because so many real life and in movie examples of spacesuits. It's hard to make a spacesuit that looks cool and different, but they managed to do it. The space travel sequences were spectacular. Manhattan was spectacular, and the Silver Surfer was really amazing. It was
Yeah, I
one
don't
thing.
think that's a spoiler. It was in the trailer. So you know that Silver Surfer is there. Movie makers wanted you to know. So that yeah, but anyway, just be careful. Those spoilers yet.
Yeah, just the level of detail. I'll give you one example out of hundreds of Easter eggs. And I mean, there's literally hundreds of Easter eggs in this movie if you want to look for them. You don't have to. You can enjoy it perfectly fine. Everything makes sense and you follow from A to B to C really easily. But if you look carefully in the background, you'll see things like talk about inside baseball and really knowing your comic book history. The scene where Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, is about to confront one of the main characters. He's standing in front of a building in Times Square, and there's a big sign on the building. But if you look really closely, the sign says Timely Comics, and Timely Comics published the first Human Torch story.
Ah, okay.
So,
Wow, that's a
it's
deep
Times
cut.
Square, and there's going to be lots of billboards and fancy signs, and they chose a sign that was perfect for this character. And if you didn't know what was going on, you just say, "Oh, he's standing in front of a big sign." But if you really know the history of it, you can say, "Wow, that's amazing! They actually found a way to fit in the origin of that character in just one shot." And there's all kinds of other little details like that that are are through everything. So it's those kind of like details that like yes, that's exactly what that person would do. And then of course there's a giant villain in it, Galactus, and it's one of the best done giant in the history of film. I mean, the level of minute detail there is just amazing, and you have to see it on a big screen to understand how much detail there really is there, because they're trying to make this, giant that's hundreds of feet tall and it clearly has, vast superhuman cosmic powers look like they have huge, vast superhuman superpowers when you put them on an IMAX screen that's 80 feet tall. And
Yeah, yeah,
that's not easy to
absolutely.
do. That takes a lot of work to put in all those details so that, when you blow it up to that size, all the details are still there. All right, this is kind of getting into the movie magic, but
Yeah, I was gonna say, you've got a lot of things that you'd love to share, and we will share all of that with you coming soon in the spoiler section. But let's
oh,
just
and then
dedicate.
they're traveling the cosmos. That's also incredible space travel
Yeah,
sequences.
yeah, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. I promise. I promise you, there will be plenty of time, and we'll tell those who wish to know more in the spoiler section about it. But just closing thoughts: the visuals are fantastic. The acting is fantastic, even though they are getting some more recycled sort of actors. Like if you've seen Pedro Pascal in the other properties before, I would say you're getting a somewhat similar experience as far as like because that's how good he is, right? He really knows how to engage you. The story is very authentic to the comics, and not just the graphic novel comics that you see in your Barnes and Noble that have come out in recent years. No, I'm talking about like way back in the day, sort of callbacks and authenticity. I mean, it is set in the 60s and I believe 1960s era of the United States.
Now,
Earth
yes,
616 1960s, we'll
they've
say.
gotten all those details beautifully worked out. The comic book issues that the story is primarily based on came out in 1965, and that's the year that it's set, is in
Okay.
1965.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I figured. I didn't know if they said it as a weird, because there's another property that I was gonna say. If you're into superhero movies, you're gonna love this. If you had superhero fatigue, this is a fresh start because they're in this sort of alternate universe style where it's away from all where the Avengers are. So it's like a fresh look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And if you don't know much about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Fantastic Four, this is a great start for you. You can take your first steps into either the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the Fantastic Four or both. And if you like this style, I encourage those of you who enjoy the Fallout TV series or the Fallout video games to give this one a try as well, because this really makes you feel like you're in that universe when it was before the Fallout began and the nukes dropped. This kind of feels like what the world probably might have been like somewhat. Very futuristic, a lot of cool things going on, sort of old tech mixing with new tech, like the old tech design mixing with new tech philosophy, right? And futuristic stuff. So if you like that sort of theme and that immersion, then you're gonna love sitting through this because you may not even be thinking about the action that's there, which is awesome, or the story, which is awesome, or the music, which really keeps you enthralled and entranced throughout, and really knows when to hit you with these poignant moments. Which, of course, Michael Giacchino is the one that did The Incredibles. Did that fantastic theme for them and many others. Mission Impossible, Wally, and many more. Well, he's back once again, helping out with a wonderful IP here in Fantastic Four. And so, if you like that aspect of it, you're going to be engaged. You're just going to be you know what it is? This is the elevator pitch. You ready? So, it's like if you wanted to create a Disney amusement park experience for the Fantastic Four, but instead of getting like 5 minutes in a weird, like awkward sort of cosplay situation for like 2 minutes, you get 2 whole hours of a Disney amusement park ride dedicated to the Fantastic Four. There's action, there's adventure, there's wonderful graphics, there's acting that keeps you engaged, there's music that's wonderful,
There's
and if you see
comedy,
it, Yes, and on top of everything else, if you happen to see it in IMAX, it feels like you're in a roller coaster itself too, with the sounds, the surround sound, and how the visuals are and everything. Yeah, I mean, we'll save our final review and everything to the end of spoilers. So very soon, you will avert your eyes, close your eardrums, and skip ahead to the final verdict if you don't want spoilers. And I encourage you, if you haven't seen the movie yet, please do so, or at least watch the movie first and then watch the spoiler section of this show, and then come back and see our final verdict as well. But bottom line, go see this thing, right? Go see it.
Yeah, go see it and see it with a friend because it's got feel good vibes.
All right. So, without further ado, let's get into the spoiler section. Ooh, spoilers. Ah. All right. Where do you want to start? I don't know. There's
Well,
so
let's
many
start
things to
with
unpack.
Julia Garner as the Silver Surfer. I mean,
I love
this
that. Yes, great start.
she was great on Ozark, and she's a really interesting choice because the Silver Surfer is usually portrayed as like physically perfect, like a giant kind of being that, that they're like an ideal of what a humanoid would be. That kind of fits because they're the herald of Galactus, the most powerful being in the universe. So if you're going to represent the most powerful being in the universe, then you'd better be, pretty powerful too, and pretty amazing. But she really brings it off, and I, I, I think that physically she doesn't look like what you expect, but she has the acting, and she also has the acting chops to have that turning point where she realizes that even though she did a lot of good by becoming the Herald of Galactus, that over time she's now done more harm than good. And she realizes that she has to change her ways. And so, she was great at portraying that dramatic shift that she just couldn't be who she was before. She had to go on a new path. And the visuals were just stunning because the Silver Surfer is supposed to be able to fly through the cosmos and withstand anything. The most powerful storms or planets exploding, supernova, nothing can harm the Silver Surfer. They are more invulnerable than Superman. Okay, they can take anything and it won't even slow him down. In this version, it was kind of like a Jack Kirby drawing where they have these deep dark shadows and you're not sure where they're coming from, but somehow they tell you that okay, there's a dark side to this creature too, along with the shininess. And they personally are unscathed by the universe, but it's kind of left a little mark on them. It was a fresh take on the Silver Surfer that I think worked. Also, they kind of did a fresh take on the Thing because somehow he was more like the Thing in the comic books, where he wasn't entirely happy about being the Thing. And I know
Yeah,
it sort of touched on that in the other ones, but here I think you could feel it a little bit more that yeah, he had all these superpowers, and that was cool, but there were also issues that came with it.
it's funny. Fantastic Four from Fox. One of the only like shining parts of the movie were two things, in my opinion, and it's funny that you brought them both up right after each other. So I think it's perfect for me to. I'll go back into the past briefly, and then we'll flash forward. Okay. Number one, I think that the Thing,
Michael Chiklis.
Michael Chiklis. I thought it was Ben Chiklis, but it's because Ben Grimm
Yeah, Michael
makes it.
Chiklis was a
Yeah.
great thing.
Absolutely. So that was one of the shining bright spots. But people kind of dogged on it because it's like, oh, what is this like love plot line that's going on here? People, I believe, yeah, well, it's tough for me to say the word misinterpreted because everyone has the right to their own opinion and their interpretation of art. That's the beauty of it. But I think that if you have the context of the comics and also what the writers of that movie were trying to do. Yes, there's a love sort of affair thing going on, but it's more about his attachment to being human, being a humanoid, right? He feels like he was losing his humanity in that older movie, and so it's sort of his love for the human image, and that's represented in the love interest, right? So it's not about the actual physical romance; it's about the emotional parts of it, right?
Oh, and Michael Chiklis would still be a great thing because it doesn't matter
Yeah,
how old he is because, it's all CG.
I don't remember the last thing Mike was in, but maybe he can jump back into acting with a
Oh, he's still
I mean,
acting. I mean, he's
yeah,
too successful an actor to fall off
yeah.
the map. He's just on shows,
So So I think that Mr. Chiklis could easily make an appearance as an alternative thing, similar to what we saw in Deadpool and Wolverine. But I don't know if that's going to happen. That's far from the point. The point is that was one thing that they got really well. They treated the thing with better reverence than you would expect from a movie in the 2000s. The other was the Silver Surfer, played by Doug Jones. And Doug Jones just has this way. It doesn't matter what part you give him. You put him in a weird costume, he doesn't look human at all, and he'll bring that energy to your screen. He's one of those few actors that exists where when you put him in a movie, he himself will carry that movie throughout because you'll be wondering, man, that Doug Jones character, that's cool. Oh man, now he's in the scene. Oh, I want to pay attention. He wasn't given much with that sequel, but boy, did he make it worth his weight in silver in that movie. It
Yes,
was really something to see
yes.
him.
And Doug is also one of the nicest people in the world, just a genuinely kind, generous person. That's just who he is.
Yeah, yeah, and you've actually had a chance of working with Mr. Jones in the past, isn't that right?
Oh, yes. I worked with Doug on Space Command and on some other projects, and I've met him at events and done promotion with him, and he's just a great person to everybody. But Julia Garner is also a nice person, and she had her own unique take on the Fantastic Four, and uh, what's her name? Kirby, Vanessa Kirby, who played Sue Storm. She was great. She played a modern, more assertive female superhero than you would have had in
Yeah.
the 1960s. But this is an alternative 60s where,
It would appear that racism and sexism are a time of a bygone era. It got phased out by technological advancements. Humanity has sort of transcended those petty squabblings, or whatever. There's world peace, like all the countries are together. So in that context, right, we have some aspects of the 60s that are embraced, and in this Earth 828, but you have to keep in mind this is not a
well,
historical documentary. This is
well, that
a
has nothing to do with the story of the movie. I mean, the story is about the Fantastic Four who have kind of reached a peak of their success and fame, and now Reed and Sue are going to be parents, and their life is going on. And Reed has invented a system for keeping track of the supervillains, so if they try and get out of control, he can head them off, and so everything looks good. And then there's something completely out of left field comes in, and the whole world gets overthrown, and it doesn't have anything to do with politics or human history. It's about something new that nobody has ever imagined.
This is a
Yeah,
unique kind of movie, unique kind of storytelling, right? Et cetera, et cetera. It's really tough to choose between who's the better thing and who's the better Silver Surfer, but it's way blows out of the water every other aspect: visual, music, acting, story. Like it destroy. It's not even in the
oh, the
same
production design
universe.
is just
You
amazing.
know?
Like, I mean, this is one of those movies where I would like to live in that room, or I would like to have that
Yeah.
prop in my house. I mean, it's just that well done that everything looks cool and interesting, and it's like the faster than light spaceship. It's like, wow, that's really a cool spaceship. All of it is grounded in stuff that has something to do with our reality, but they've just taken it to another level. I mean, we've had stretchy heroes before, but this is probably the best stretchy hero that we've ever seen, right? His elastic powers just look cooler. They don't look cartoony. The Human Torch's flames, those just seem like they're just, that much better than they've ever done a flame power before. Just
Yeah, and that brings me up to another fantastic part of the movie. I would say that every one of the Fantastic Four got equal justice done for them, and that was the huge problem with all the other Fantastic Fours is that there would be like one bright spot, right? Michael B. Jordan was the bright spot in Fan Four-tastic Four. You had Michael Chiklis as the bright spot, and then later on Doug Jones in the Fox versions. But this time all of them had their time to shine, and boy, did they do that. But I want to particularly highlight the Johnny Storm plotline. I think that people have gotten the impression over the years that Johnny Storm was a dumb bimbo, just some, jock that is kind of along for the ride of all these very intelligent people. But people forget, like, he wasn't just there out of nepotism on that team. He was there because of his intellect to be able to become an astronaut. And that's why he was on the ride there with them, is because he had the intelligence enough to be an astronaut at a basic level. But this movie goes beyond that. He becomes a savant in language, and this really helps us further in the plot. But it's sort of treated as like a C plot line. It's not really that big of a focus throughout the movie, which makes sense. We're not here to learn languages. We're here to see awesome fights and see all these characters develop, right? But it pays off in huge dividends later on because you're like, oh my gosh, wow, Johnny Storm is super clutch. Wow.
This is the best translating a foreign language since Indiana Jones.
Indeed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not a linguist or whatever, but it does certainly feel a little bit more realistic and authentic. Now, one simple question I had the whole time is, why didn't they just get AI to figure out the language there? But the counter is that you need the human element to understand things like influx, right? You need the human element to understand the context of the saying that she gave, because maybe an AI wouldn't be able to pick up on those things like that, right? But Johnny Storm uses his intellect, right? And he's able to figure this out. And really, he helped he saved the day. He was able to add an ally, a very important ally. But I'm getting a little disjointed here. What I like to do on the spoiler section is I like to go through chronological order of the movie. We can start out with going a little crazy, but I also like to reset us and we just do what happened in the movie from an objective standpoint and go from there.
Yes.
So we went in a lot of different places, but let's do that. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, this was a great example of what Marvel does really well with writing, that they make all the details matter. So even though the translation of this extraterrestrial language seems like it's kind of a C plot, it actually plays a really important role in the final sequences of the movie. And so if you weren't following in all the details, you don't need to know all the details, but you do get this satisfaction that, okay, we talked about that back there, and I wasn't quite sure why that was important, but now I see that that was why it was important.
Absolutely. We start this movie with the establishing fact that this is a Elseworld story, alternate universe story. Basically, this is not happening in the Avengers that we know, Earth 828, which, by the way, is a wonderful Easter egg and homage to the birthday of Jack Kirby. And that was really heartwarming to see that at the end. That was probably one of my favorite Easter eggs, was that naming convention that they chose. Then we go in, and it's just like Superman. Go right into the action. You've seen these other iterations of Fantastic Four, so they kind of know, okay, we're going to do it classic 60s sort of animation or comic book style where you've got an announcer and he goes, and the wonderful Fantastic Four in their adventures went to the planet, as you know, was suddenly burst with cosmic powers. And they just say it in this wonderful 60s announcer cadence and they describe it very well. Oh, I should also mention they do this really wonderful scene to describe how the cosmic powers, and they do this like documentary style where it's like very much sort of man on the wall mockumentary style where they're filming and they're showing you, and it feels really special. You're like, oh man, I'm getting to be a part of the launch of the Fantastic Four before they face their cosmic fate.
Destiny.
And yeah, for cosmic destiny, they had a great term for it. I'll play it on the audio, but they have a term.
And now, your host for the evening, Ted Gilbert.
Well, folks, we all know the story. Four brave astronauts head up into space, encounter a bit of cosmic turbulence, and come back forever changed. Not just the molecules of their bodies, but also their place in our hearts.
That I have just played. So that term was really fun. And they basically described the plot of sort of the prequel of Fantastic Four. And I think my favorite, I guess, quote unquote, Easter egg is these wonderful sequences of battles of all these niche heroes that, really aren't that,
Oh yeah, the vintage Fantastic Four villains
yeah.
get to have their little cameo.
Yeah, and it's not anything too crazy in an isolation, but it sort of like builds up. Oh, here's this fight. Oh, here's this fight. Oh, this, that, the third. I always had the Silver Surfer as one of the top Fantastic Four villains, so I was good already. But then they added the vintage ones. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. Now it kind of makes me want to go back into those comics and be like, I wonder what they
Yeah,
were
the
getting up
super
to.
apes, that maybe you couldn't
Yeah.
put a whole movie on the evil super apes, but for a couple of minutes it was great.
Well, they did tease at the end. I guess this is getting a little ahead of myself, but they did tease a animated series that would be based on the image of the Fantastic Four First Steps movie. So perhaps we might very well see an episode of that coming very soon to a Disney Plus screening near you. But we'll have to wait and see what that happens. But anyway, we see that basically they're in a good position. Again, very similar to the plot of Superman, where they're basically winning. And so the Fantastic Four are near basically, it's like in a video game where you're like about to get 100% completion. This is really a good time for humanity. Everything feels great. But then they learn that they are with child, that Sue Storm and Reed Richards are with child. And this is kind of a dangerous situation because they have a cosmic energy in each of them. What could that do to the baby, right? We don't know. So we're trying to figure that out as an audience. They're trying to figure it out. They're doing all these tests. And then they walk onto this balcony. You see them together, and they're really a cohesive team. Like they really got things locked down. And Reed Richards just casually mentions, "Hey, I figured out all these criminal organizations, and that one's being indicted, and we've got a police raider on that one, and I think organized crime's been solved, guys. So we solved world peace, we solved all these technological problems, space travel. Now we solved organized crime. Wow, that's wonderful. So what's next, eh?" And then suddenly, the scene changes, and a dark cloud hovers over New York City. And you see this cosmic array come forth. And it looks like you're about to see a Thanos invasion or something. Some massive army has come and descended upon their humble little abode. And as it turns out, it is a harbinger, a herald. It is the Silver Surfer. She comes out and she explains what?
Well, she explains that she's the Herald of Galactus and that the Earth is going to be destroyed, so go have a good time.
That's exactly right. She goes on live TV, she does her thing, and she bounces, and everyone's wondering, what are we gonna do, But they feel good, like they are optimistic because the Fantastic Four have taken on all these threats. And a big threat they took on was this guy, the Mole Man, who was in this universe. There's a underbelly. There's an underworld. So there's these underdwelling humans that have like sort of been in conflict with the overworld for many years. But Sue Storm, with her wonderful powers of diplomacy and charisma, has been able to diffuse that for now. But now that there's this great threat looming, there's this question of what could happen with the mole men and the underbelly and the underground world. And so there's this sort of Chinese fire drill that's going on the news media. Oh gosh! But again, they are hopeful because they believe in the Fantastic Four. So why don't you take us away? What happens next?
Okay, so they confront the Silver Surfer. and her power far exceeds theirs, and she flies away from the Earth and back to Galactus. But Reed Richards has this amazing telescope technology that allows him to look for the energy signature of the Silver Surfer in other planetary systems, and they're eventually able to track down to where the Silver Surfer and Galactus might be. And so they get onto their spaceship, which is amazing. You know, it's located right in like the coast of Manhattan. They have this, rocket base, but
Yeah.
this they make it look really plausible. And then, they fly off into outer space, and they go, faster than light across the galaxy to wherever Galactus is, and they confront Galactus, and that's a, a pretty good sequence too, where they try and negotiate, and they learn that you can't negotiate with Galactus. That
Yeah. And remember what Steve Rogers says, my wonderful co-host. We don't trade lives. So Galactus offered, hey, I'll take your awesome cosmic child. It actually does have some cosmic energy in it, but it's great. It's wonderful. Here's the catch. You need to give it to me, and I won't destroy all of Earth. Fair? You know? And even Reed Richards himself, in his logical deduction, says it's ethical and practical. He somewhat makes a case for it because one cosmic life for 8 billion human lives, mathematically, there is an argument that could be made. However, of course, we are in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we don't trade lives in the Marvel Cinematic Universe if we can avoid it. So they get into a fight and blah, 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 blah. So take us through to the next sort of.
Yes, they escape from Galactus's uh, base somewhere in the galaxy, and the Silver Surfer, of course, is able to follow them because she can travel faster than light, and there's no weapon that can stop her. And so, while all this is happening, Sue Storm goes into labor, and their son Franklin is about to be born. There's like 10 different things going on at once, but the film does a great job of keeping you on top of each of the different things that are all happening at once.
Absolutely. There's a lot more parts we could get into, but even though this is the spoiler section, I feel as though you can enjoy the plot better by just watching the movie and not necessarily hearing our whole explanation. There's probably more nuances that we're missing or whatever. We are gonna use movie magic here. We're gonna flash forward, and we get to the scene where Galactus gives them a ultimatum, and all of Earth is now banding together to face this threat. And I'm talking about every planet on Earth. And they have this awesome montage scene where all of the countries are saving power so they can power up this technology that will help them
Move
defeat.
the Earth.
Yes, yes, yes. Transport the Earth. Move heaven and earth to save Franklin. Which, boy, what a man! Isn't that a terrible future for Franklin? He's got to get up at 7 a.m. for school or something, and the kid and the parents say, "Well, honey, we moved heaven and earth for you here, so maybe you could get up and get some good grades there." Just saying. But anyway, they do try and move heaven and earth, and there's this whole, sort of World War II old school. Uncle Sam wants you, the Fantastic Four wants you to conserve power and all that stuff. And they even get the Underground to come together. They've managed to
Yeah,
make
the Mole
diplomacy work.
Man's underworld, and that was great. There, we're now getting towards the end of the movie. Just to fast forward, that the Mole Man was introduced as a former foe who they've now made peace with, and that turns out to have a huge dividend because they know Galactus is coming to Earth, and he's going to land in Manhattan. So they evacuate Manhattan to the underworld. So when Galactus rampages, no one gets hurt.
Exactly. It was a perfect plan. It was a plan designed only by it could only be designed by only Mr. Fantastic and the Fantastic Four could come up with a plan like that. So they have this epic fight scene. But just before the fight scene, Johnny Storm confronts Silver Surfer. And he does two things that make his character literally the best depiction of Johnny Storm you've ever seen or will ever see. I probably think, maybe it'll be beaten later on, but this is like a Joker level edition of Johnny Storm. And Johnny Storm, he says, "I've learned your language," and he starts speaking the language, and he starts empathizing with her and says, "Look, you've probably seen a lot of other planets get destroyed, but you can't take mine. I'm only doing what you would do." And they have this flashback scene where they show Silver Surfer become the Silver Surfer, and the Silver Surfer is very empathetic, just like in the comics. it's not that they do it out of malice. They do it out of necessity. They're trying to save their planet, so they become the herald as sort of a bargaining chip. Very similar to what they were gonna offer with the child, but she said yes, and the Fantastic Four said no, and so Johnny Storm says, "You got to help us out," and so she leaves them still wanting, right? Like, not necessarily convinced yet. But then Johnny Storm says, "If you're not okay with not taking the boy, then take me, and I'll become." I mean, he was ready to sacrifice himself for the greater good, and I mean, wow, that just really leveled him up another level than he already was with his intellect. But now he has courage, great courage, and commitment to being a hero, and that's what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is all about. That's what superheroes are all about, even though the Silver Surfer basically says, "Tough luck, kid. You should probably just evacuate everyone and leave this planet," and then she leaves. You still are left wondering as an audience, what's Johnny Storm going to do next? So we flash forward, as you said, and we get this epic battle scene, one of the most epic battle scenes ever. It was really awesome. Uh,
Fantastic Four versus Galactus, and the point of the battle isn't to defeat Galactus. No, it's to trick him into
yes.
going into the teleportation device.
Yeah, yeah, and Galactus has some old tricks up his sleeve as well, because of course, he's Galactus, right? So he's one of the most powerful beings in the universe. So he kind of knows what's going on with the trick. So he counters the trick, and then they counter the trick of the trick, and eventually, what happens?
Well, eventually they do get him into the teleportation device, but they can't keep him there. So the Silver Surfer saves the day and pushes him through the portal as it closes. So now Galactus has been teleported far, far away. And
Along with the Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer has also
oh, the Silver
sacrificed herself to save this planet that she did not know at all. But Johnny Storm was able to empathize with her, and she understood what he was talking about, and I think in a way saved her planet too, right? Technically, because Galactus can't eat it anymore because he's trapped wherever. Um,
Yeah, well, he's probably
and
not trapped, and they probably could do another story with Galactus, but they have a better idea. The end credit scene shows you that they actually are going to connect this alternative universe
that's
up
the
with
plot scene. Yep.
and we don't need to go into the details of that because there's going to be a sequel to Superman, and that's happening next year, 2026, with Supergirl, and there's going to be a sequel to Fantastic Four where it's Avengers Doomsday because Doomsday is going to be the next MCU movie. However, there's also going to be Marvel TV shows coming up soon. And in fact, there's going to be a Wakanda, the Black Panthers TV series coming up, I think this summer.
Yeah, it's coming up very soon, and that's how they get you. These Disney Plus series and movies. They just every year they're just looking for the next one. How do we make this continually contained into the zeitgeist of the cultural consciousness? Because if even just one year is missed out, then that could result in this $26 billion monster getting felled at some point. So they need to keep anyway. That's the inside baseball there, but so yeah. I mean, like we said in the beginning, I mean, there's not much more to say that are pros. I do have two cons that are really quick, but yeah, I mean, awesome visuals, awesome music. Michael Giacchino knows when to use these swells in these moments of epic proportions, and it makes you jump up at your seat when he plays the brass. He did just such an excellent job using those the brass orchestral
Yeah,
swells.
those are the orchestrators that are doing that.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, that's where you're the expert on this, but yeah,
But everything in movies is a team. Actors are supported by a team. Okay, they have
true.
like a dialect coach and an acting coach, and they have hair and makeup, and all of that has to come together to make the actor's performance along with the director. So the music department, I mean, there's a lead composer, but then there's also additional music composers, and then there's orchestrators, and then there's copyists, and then there's people who program the synthesizers, and then there's, the virtuoso orchestra and a chorus, and, this recording studio and the engineers. I mean, all of those people have to be doing a good to great job for the final product to be great. And it even goes farther than that, because even if the score is amazing, it has to be mixed with the other sounds, with the dialogue and the sound effects. And that's a really complicated art. In fact, that's actually one of the hardest, most rarefied jobs to get in the world, is to be a mixer on feature movies, because getting all those elements to balance so that you get the maximum excitement and emotion and it all stays cohesive for the whole movie. There's only a handful of people in the world that are really good at doing that. So yeah, everything has big teams, and when you go through the credits, I mean, the credits go on forever. It looks like they're rising up from the core of the earth and flying into the depths of space. There's thousands and thousands of people literally that worked on the movie just doing visual effects, because each of those visual effects takes a team of people to do it. And you don't need to know all of that to enjoy it. But I like going to the websites of the visual effects companies to look at their what's called a show reel, where they're showing off their best works. And you can see the amazing things they do. And they'll often have a breakdown where they show you each individual layer that goes into the effect. And those are, for me, really cool to watch, where it's like, okay, that's not that interesting. Now it's getting a little more interesting. Now it's starting to get really interesting. Now it's starting to get amazing. Well, that's astonishing. And, it's like you can see how it didn't happen by magic, that they, one step at a time, they improved it.
But here's two cons that I must mention if I, want to maintain my integrity as a reviewer. Because as much as I love the movie, there's two flaws. Number one, the plot line where all of Earth becomes paranoid because Galactus is wanting to take their kid and they refuse. I just don't. My suspension of disbelief was taken away when the response to that, the answer was, well, Sue Storm's going to give the most impassioned speech in human history, we'll say. The best speech you've ever heard to a crowd, a relatively small crowd, and I say relatively as in 7 billion people, 8 billion people, gives it to a crowd of, let's say, at best, 10,000 people. Gives a wonderful speech to a crowd of 10,000 people, and let's say, even more get accessed via a live stream of a live, programming of it, and where she basically says, guys, my childhood sucked and was very tragic, and we shouldn't be continuing the cycle. We should give a better future to our children. And that's all well and good. But, you know, it's too much for me to say that all of Earth not only was willing to get on board with one style of strategy to defeat Galactus, but that all of Earth was then down to go with another strategy after learning that, most people probably would say, "Oh, that's a fantastic deal. 8 billion for one?" It's like Reed Richards said, right? But I understand this is a different universe, whatever, but it did take me out of the movie. I'm like, this is very campy. This is very Disney-fied. This is a very Disney type plot where they say all of Earth is magically together, and then magically a speech sort of brings them together again away from their sort of primal
Yes.
urges.
I
So that was
understand
a
what you're
con.
saying. The way I saw that scene, and this is just the way I interpreted it, was that, okay, she's talking to the people who are not okay with their plan, that she's not trying to address the whole world, that it's just a fraction that isn't on board with the plan that actually is really a better plan. Because how can you trust a deal that you're making with a cosmic entity that thinks you're all insects?
Oh yeah, no. I
Yeah,
let me be
it's probably
clear.
a better
They
plan
are
to,
correct.
escape completely than to just leave everything up to, okay, well, we can trust this being that, yesterday wanted to destroy the whole earth.
So I should clarify. The plan was good, relatively speaking, we should say,
Uh,
when you're talking
So
about fighting a
that's all I'm
cosmic threat.
saying is that
Yeah.
the
You're
way
right.
it hit me was that she wasn't trying to convince the whole earth about it, but just the people who were complaining and upset,
Yeah.
which were
And
a smaller group.
all I'm saying is you know me. I can be too much of a realist sometimes. I like being a realist, even though my suspension of disbelief is pretty high. But the notion that like all of Earth and like a percentage, a non-significant percentage didn't exist enough to sort of hampen the plan and their solution. I think that's really the sticking point for me, is not even that there was hardly any rumorings of dissent to this sort of plan. As you said, giving a baby to the cosmic being, we don't know if they're going to betray. We don't know if that baby isn't going to work because Galactus said, oh, well, I consumed the baby and I won't have to consume anymore. Well, what happens if they consume the baby and then they still want to consume and they still have this urge? Well, we don't know if that's going to work or not. So we're just experimenting really with a rare, extremely unique cosmic being, right? That's not a really good trade. There's cosmic beings are like 1 in a trillion, right? Something like that. So anyway, I was going to say the problem I have more so is the movies or the writers, whatever you want to term your supply, Sue Storm's solution to that. The solution is say one epic, what can you even say, the best speech in historical history. One speech was enough to convince everyone. Other point was that the Galactus character really didn't get a lot of screen time, unfortunately. I get it, but they didn't really delve into like the background, the backstory. They basically did a trade. They said, "Well, we won't do Galactus, but we'll do Silver Surfer," right? But I just felt like the Galactus character is just so important to the history of the Fantastic Four. Like, if you're gonna do Fantastic Four justice, you should also include Galactus, and I don't think they did that quite enough in this movie. They basically gave him a throwaway line, and that's not quite enough for me.
Yeah,
And
it would be
yeah,
nice to see more Galactus, and who knows, maybe in the special features, extras, that we'll get more. I know we're going to get some more supervillains that they didn't include, because they wanted the movie to move more quickly, and that's really important, especially when it's an action movie.
yeah.
And uh, Also, it could be that they just wanted to keep Galactus mysterious because that was actually something that they kind of had an issue with, is that when they started doing too much Galactus, he started to become less of a threat because people knew too much about him.
That's a fair point. Okay. I
And
will.
that actually kind of
Yeah,
worked because that made Stan and Jack and the other writers have to come up with even more epic cosmic
yeah,
beings that were even
yeah.
more powerful.
After you've explained it that way, I actually think you're right. I guess it's just my love for villain backstories. I love villains. Well, villains are one of my favorite parts of movies. I guess that was like that part
Well,
of
I'm
it keeping me.
sure that we're going to get lots of villain backstory with
Oh
Doctor
yes,
Doom
they'll
and
have to
Robert
do
Downey
that.
Jr. I mean, I'm sure that's in his contract.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I suppose there's other ways to make movie magic happen, right? Can happen in the spirit of the mind, right? But anyway,
Right. Well,
so
that's where the stories really come to life, is
yeah,
in
so
your imagination. That you're
absolutely.
the magic ingredient that all art needs. As no matter how great the artist is, they need a great audience.
Indeed, indeed. We've talked about what we loved about the movie. We talked a little bit about what we disliked. Did you have any dislikes for the movie, or did you kind of just
I
you were
pretty
with it
much
100%?
liked the whole thing. I mean, I would have liked the super science that Reed Richards did to be more based in real science, but that's
Yeah.
too small to mention, really. And I would have liked the movie to have an iconic theme, but Marvel movies rarely have iconic themes, except for the Avengers. Dum 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 da dum dum. That's a great theme, but most of the Marvel movies don't have that. That's one of the great things that Superman has that iconic theme, but maybe someday I'll get to write an iconic theme for Marvel.
Hey, anything is possible, and that's I think that's the moral of this movie here. Anything is possible if you put your mind, effort, and energy into it. Is that corny? Yes. Was it still a fantastic movie that you should go see? Yes. So this is going to be the final rating section. We've talked a little bit about what we enjoy. Like we said in the beginning, go see this movie. We absolutely love it. I'm at a 9 out of 10. There are some imperfect parts that I noticed as I was watching. That's the only reason why I'm not at a 10, is I didn't feel 110% engaged the whole time. It felt every piece was perfectly put together. Yeah, there were a couple of missteps, but Who cares, man? It's fun. It was awesome. Go see it.
A 9 to 10. Uh, it takes more time, perspective to decide if this is going to make my top 20 of all time action movies, superhero movies. But it's definitely a strong candidate. It's in the running for being one of the best superhero movies, one of the best action movies ever made.
Yeah, it's tough. I hate
It
to
has
get rid
such
of
a
the
good
only.
vibe to it. The action, the visuals are fantastic, stunning, yet it has so much heart, and you really feel for all the characters. And there's so many different kind of characters, from man on the street to babies to the pet robot. And I just really think this is one of the best movies, and it's a great sign of things to come. That this is phase 6. And phase 3 and phase 4 were really kind of peak Marvel. And then phase 5, they started to kind of lose their way a little bit, but now they are back on track. This is the first film in phase 6, and it's a home run.
Yeah, it is a great first step into phase 6. And once again, like we will almost always reiterate, go see it in the theater. It's got great visuals that are appreciated in a movie. It's got awesome music and sound effects that fit well in the acoustics of a theater. And as my dad said, go see it with a friend as well, because then you guys get to share your thoughts. You can bounce ideas off each other. Well, what was your thoughts on the movie? Oh, well, did you like that part? Whatever. That's a wonderful thing. And that's only possible at a local movie theater near you. Moving on and trucking on forward, we have some insider baseball to talk about with regard to Fantastic Four. Everyone's wondering, what's the big box office question here for Fantastic Four? First steps.
Well, it's opened to like 120 million, which was one of the biggest openings of the year. So that was great. It had been a while since Wolverine and Deadpool that they had a blockbuster hit. And it, this is like its second, or this is going to be maybe its third weekend. It's already up to around $400 million. So it's definitely going to be a big hit. It looks like it's going to take a while to build superhero movies back up to the $1 billion range, because, just like the comic books, superhero movies were looked down on as being lower quality and less popular. But then they smashed through all of those old and wrong ideas, and they became the biggest, most successful movies in the world, with the best actors and the best visual effects, etc. So now they kind of have to go through a building cycle again. I think that's where we're at. That again, they had 11 years of fantastically successful, extremely record-setting box office. I think we talked a little bit about that. That they had 25 successful movies in a row, which just smashed the previous record. The previous record was like
Yeah,
10 or 11, and they had like over 20. That's like a just completely lapped the best performance of any other studio or genre. And that can't be sustained forever. So now it looks like they're building back up that energy. They just have to keep making good movies, which is easier
absolutely.
said than done, especially, you know, when the world's changing all the time. But I think they can do it, or at least I'm rooting for Marvel to keep coming up with the hits. As long as they keep making good movies and TV shows, I'm going to keep watching them. And you don't have to watch them all.
Indeed. This is a interesting influx period for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where on top of that, they had this complete change in storyline that they had to do last minute as a result of what the experts call off the field issues. And as a result of this being a program for general audiences, we will simply say that there was a bad guy, and then they became a bad guy, and now there's a different bad guy. And we hope that this bad guy has left their bad tendencies in the 90s, and will not have another TMZ story or something of that nature come up this time around. So that's another factor that we have to address as well, is that You had to switch the MCU plotline, and so that kind of confused audiences probably. But this movie, again, you don't
I think it
need
actually was a good idea because the direction they were going in was not inspiring people as much as this new direction. I wish
exactly.
that the Fantastic Four was an even bigger hit, but it's definitely a success, and it's showing that the MCU still has it, that they can still make hit movies where people want to see more.
Absolutely. I think that it is a good decision. People kind of clowned on it because, oh, you got Tony Stark as Doctor Doom. You got such a good gem that you have to use him again or whatever. But I mean, it does make sense when you consider the fact that yeah, Tony Stark was initially a bad guy and then he became a good guy. So in the lore in the MCU, it actually makes perfect sense for him to be Doctor Doom, in my opinion. In some
Yes, and
universe,
Robert Downey Jr. is a great actor, objectively a great actor. He was in great movies before he was even considered for being in Marvel, and
yeah.
uh, seems to be one of the few actors who gets how to act in a superhero movie.
Yeah. And he did a great performance as a villain
And there
in
are people who
Oppenheimer.
have, been cast well and they've done, really great performances in one or two movies, but RDJ has kept it up. He's been able to deliver really strong superhero movie performances like 10 times.
Indeed. There were some times when I was a kid where my attention span would drift and I would say, "Oh man, why do I want to stick around with all these credits?" But first of all, you had those awesome post-credit scenes. I think if I had grown up in the 80s, I probably wouldn't have appreciated the post-end credit scene magic as much.
Yeah, that was really introduced with Iron Man, right?
Yeah, exactly. But because I was growing in the 2000s, I'm like, oh, let me stick through. Let me see what the post credit scene is going to be. It's interesting to see. Like sometimes you'll see that they filmed in a location that you wouldn't expect. Like for example, I don't think they filmed in New York. I looked at the credits and it was like they did Quebec and like Hawaii, but I don't think they actually did New York, Manhattan, which I guess makes sense. This is an alternate universe, New York, right?
Right. Well, that's something we can look up. I mean, I know that Marvel shoots a lot in Atlanta. Atlanta has become like a new Hollywood where they've built huge high-tech studios. Like they have what are called green screens. That's where you can film the actors in front of a blank surface that can be replaced with visual effects. But to make it look right, especially if it's epic scale, you have to have the actors in front of a screen that's approximately the size that the effect would be if they were in front of a real set. There's things like the volume. The volume is a Disney thing, but now other studios have it where you have a actual set partway, and then you have a LED virtual set that extends beyond it up to the sky. So the actors are walking along a set that's like 6 feet tall. So they're interacting with something that's real and their size. But then all that goes above and goes beyond in the background, all of that is digital and generated in real time. So the actors can actually see the visual effects while they're acting.
hmm yeah, it's something where at the end of the day, like most movies, we'll just have to watch it and see because all of this speculation can be all for naught. It could be a great performance or a terrible performance, but we can use our thinking noggins and speculate. What would Reed Richards say? Use a hypothesis,
Mhm.
and say that well, Robert Downey Jr. has been a pretty good actor so far, and you might predict that based on previous statistics that he's done pretty well before, he'll probably do well again. So we hope that that happens. Now, there are some netizens who have been commenting and talking about the movie. Funny enough, they happen to agree with us here at all the shows. Majority of both fans and critics are saying this is high 80s, low 90s percentage. We here at all the shows would love to have your comments as well. So feel free to email us at alltheshows010 at gmail.com. And perhaps you too will have your comment on a movie or TV that we review be featured live on our program. So we have a comment from a netizen by the name of Kevin underscore Robbins. And he gave this an 8 out of 10. He says, Fantastic Four First Steps is a strong addition to the increasingly saturated superhero genre. I actually preferred this over Superman. You can clearly see the influence of the WandaVision team. They did a fantastic job capturing the era, fleshing out the characters, and designing immersive sets that really draw you into this version of the Marvel Universe. The CGI and special effects are elite, and I highly recommend seeing this in the 3D or 3D if you get the chance. The casting was spot on across the board, maybe with the exception of Silver Surfer. As a longtime fan of the character from the comics, the gender swap threw me off at first. That said, the Surfer's powers are portrayed so impressively that it's easy to accept the change. Galactus is done perfectly. He's portrayed as a truly elite villain, and I also love the inclusion of the classic foe, Mole Man. The film does a great job of introducing the characters and establishing the stakes. There's a lot to enjoy here. And in conclusion, Fantastic Four First Steps is a strong addition to the increasingly saturated superhero genre. I'd give it an 8 out of 10 and strongly recommend. And this is one of the higher rated
Well, I agree with him.
comments.
And, on Rotten Tomatoes, it's in the 90s, and that's pretty darn good. Not many movies
Yep.
get into the 90s.
Absolutely. And it is very, very hard to get a good, solid rating on the audience score. Yeah, critics can be very high or very low, but when it comes to audience score, to get it really high like that is a good sign, though I would not recommend using that by its own, on its standing on its own percentage, right?
Well, if
But,
I'm not sure,
yeah.
though, I go with the audience. If the audience likes it and the critics like it or don't like it, I don't care. If the audience likes it and I'm thinking of going, I'm probably going to go. And if the audience doesn't like it, then I'll wait to
Now,
catch
this isn't a show without getting all the diverse of opinions here. So we've got another commenter by the netizen by the name of Plankton Rules. Hey, well,
Oh,
uh, I agree. The show rules. I don't know if the man Plankton himself rules. Maybe the voice actor himself rules. That's true. They rated this a 6 out of 10. And they said, it looks great, but somehow left me wanting more. Considering how bad the previous Fantastic Four movies have been, this 2025 version can't help but be better. However, it's an improvement and worth seeing, but also a bit disappointing, especially after seeing Superman just a week before. The story is visually stunning, has nice costumes, and it's obviously Disney. And it's obvious Disney spent a lot of money to make the film. However, it also appears as if they thought much less about making the characters believable and multidimensional. There also were a few plot elements
oh, I
which
really
seemed.
disagree with that guy.
I was going to say, I wanted to read it in full, but yeah, I disagree as well. There also were a few plot elements which seemed abbreviated, like portions of the movie were edited out and it seemed obvious. Additionally, the film could have used a small infusion of humor. So after the team manages to save the Earth, you're left thinking, is that all there is? Clearly, it's a case of a film that is enjoyable enough to watch, but also one with little staying power, meaning you'll probably forget most of the movie after a few weeks. My opinion is that for a non-Rabbit fan like me, it's one worth seeing or not.
Well,
Okay,
that
so
person wasn't paying very close attention, just saying that there's no comedy scenes. I mean, right after they save the world, there's a comedy scene.
this is outside
Yeah.
of the spoilers, so I won't say too much. And then also, they say that like portions of the movie were edited out and it seemed obvious. Well, of course they edited the movie. That's because they're trying to give you a perspective as someone who's a 1960s resident. They're giving you edits of movies and TV show experiences, like as if you, well, at least that's my interpretation anyway. You're a resident looking through the showroom glass of a TV salesman, and you're seeing these things happen. You're seeing the cosmic experience, whatever they call it, the cosmic destiny happen as if you are a member of Earth. And so that's the point, is that they're editing all of these clips of TV shows together for you to kind of be a slice of life. They also say it appears as though they thought much less about making the characters believable and multidimensional. That's probably the worst thing that this commenter said, because, well, first of all, Johnny Storm is the most multidimensional Johnny Storm you're probably ever gonna get in this next decade. I mean, he's even better than the animated series in a lot of ways. So he's more than just a dumb jock. Like, he really does well. And then the Ben Grimm plotline was really good. He's a friendly neighborhood thing, and he really develops that, and that's really good. And Reed Richards, of course, has this great intellect that is burdening him, right? That's the key. It's burdening him. And then on top of everything else, you have Sue Storm saving the world, literally saving the world. Being very diplomatic and stuff. So
And also
you know
being a good mom. She knows how to be a superhero. And this gets back to the original concept of the Fantastic Four, is that they're family first, and then she's a diplomat, he's a scientist, and a test pilot. They all have their lives, and then they're superheroes only when it's absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. Yes, that's correct. I understand, right after seeing Superman, it's really tough. It's like, man, which would you choose, one or the other? But I would say that's a false choice, saying whether Superman or Fantastic Four is the movie to see. They're both equally worth it to see. I would
Yes.
probably, if I had to gun to my head, I'd actually give the edge to Fantastic Four. But even
Because it's more of a
still,
feel-good movie where you're not only entertained, but you leave feeling better. And up to a point, so is Superman. But Superman is a little more dark and gritty compared to First Steps.
I mean, I think that it's fair to say that right after seeing Superman, you're like, oh man, that's really good. Is this really as good? But nah, man, they're either at or slightly above or slightly below. I wouldn't say it's disappointing. That's I think a bridge too far. Mr. Plankton rules, and
Yeah,
well.
well, I mean, Plankton's a villain, right? So,
Oh, hey, hey, listen, I didn't want to get canceled here. The Plankton rules are gonna say, hey, what's wrong with Plankton,
no, I
son?
like
Plankton's.
Plankton. I mean, he's a great villain. I mean, he's an animated villain.
What if he's referring to the amoeba that is in
Yes,
the
well,
ocean? Okay.
yes. Plankton definitely rule the ocean and the earth, but
That is a fact. Yes,
but I
they
don't think
dominate
that's
the
what
ocean.
this person meant. They weren't talking about ocean-going vegetables.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the world may never know. Hey, Plankton Rules, email us or comment on our YouTube at AllTheShows010 at Gmail, or talk to us on our various platforms. Please have us stand corrected if we're incorrect on that assumption. Okay,
Yes,
so
and so we'd love to
yeah.
hear from you. You're the best audience, and we care about you. So if you want us to review something, you can tell us. And if you disagree with us, let us know. If you agree with us, let us know. Leave a comment.
Now, this is going to be a speed round because we forgot about this in the previous episode, which was the Superman Insider Baseball. So, talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, just real quick about the movie magic of Superman. Probably the most frequent question people have is crypto a real dog? And they do a great job, and it is based on a real dog, but the crypto that we see in the movie is actually all CG. But on set, they did have real dogs, and they also had performance capture actors who were acting like a dog, so that the actors who were playing wouldn't just be talking to a ball and a stick, that they actually had someone they could interact with. So yeah, crypto is just really well done visual effects. And then let's see what else. Also, I think that there were cameos in Superman where they were setting up Supergirl and other series to come. So that's definitely part of James Gunn's strategy. Again, if you guys don't already know, James Gunn is not only a director, but Warner Brothers promoted him to being president of the DC Studios, along with his friend and very accomplished producer, Craig Safan. So what he's doing here is he's directing a movie and doing a good job of it, but he also is thinking ahead about what are the other movies and the other directors going to do, and how can I help set them up for success? And I think that's a kind of a rare and unique thing where you have a director who is also the head of the studio.
Yeah, that was one of the huge flaws of the WBDCU, Warner Brothers DC Cinematic Universe. Basically, they had all kinds of crazy things happening, disconjointed. You're like, what's going on? But yeah, this feels like we're setting up a plan, and the plan seems decent. So let's stick with it and see where it goes. As we mentioned last week, this was our show. We're very grateful to each of you who are listening out there. You can check us out on where can we check it? Where can they check us out? My wonderful co-host.
The video part's going to be on our YouTube channel, which is All the Shows. We'll include the handle in a little card at the end. You can find it there, and then we're also going to be wherever you can find podcasts on Apple and Spotify and Amazon and wherever you want us to be. We'll find a way to be there.
Absolutely. So now that we've submitted this episode, we're going to have 2 weeks where we're not going to have an episode. And then after that, we're going to release an episode. And we're going to be really excited to share that episode with you all. So be sure to hit the subscribe button or add our playlist to your liked section so that you can stay informed next time we go and post a wonderful episode of All the Shows. Additionally, if you have a comment, question, or concern, please do feel free to reach out to the both of us at alltheshows010@gmail.com. And we will be grateful no matter what you say. You could be critical of us. You could say something positive. Whatever you want to say, we're going to do our best to accommodate each and every one of you who comments to our show, because that means engagement, and engagement means support. Finally, as we end each show, we end our show with all the shout outs, where you can do any shout out you want to do. So you have the floor, my wonderful co-host, or should I say fantastic co-host.
I just want to shout out to every person who worked on Fantastic Four First Steps. Thank you for making a wonderful movie.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I also want to shout out 2K Games. They put out a video game that's really awesome. I'm looking forward to. Well, I don't know if it's awesome yet, but they have an awesome series called Mafia, and they are releasing a prequel episode called Mafia: The Old Country. It's trying to do a more old school style of video games where it's just a self-contained story. You play that story, and you don't have to worry about like microtransactions and paying a bunch of money. You just pay the initial price, and maybe you pay a little extra if there's a DLC at some point. But it just kind of is going to be an interesting story about a mafioso in 1900s Sicilian country. So I'm going to be live streaming that on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/silver_sire, and also live streaming on my YouTube at youtube.com/@silversire. So, if you want to see me play through that game, feel free to check that out. And I'm really looking forward to it. So, uh,
That
with
sounds
that being said,
excellent.
yeah. And I will definitely be sharing videos about it and how excellent it is. Or maybe it's bad. Who knows? You'll have to check out on my YouTube channel to find out more. In any case, we don't have an outro yet, so we're just going to simply say, stay tuned till next time. So, without further ado, bye for now. Thank you.